Woodoo, 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 woodoo. Woodoo, 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 woodoo.
As I was saying earlier, I don't believe there's a gap between life and spirituality. I kind of think it's all part of it. Because the world that I left behind felt so real, it felt like I died.
You are an enigma, and I bloody love you.
Oh, I love you too, buddy.
Hey everybody, this is the first episode of the Woodoo Podcast. I'm here with Harry Gibson.
How you doing?
And calling this episode Talking with the Village Idiot.
Harry came up with the title.
I love Harry because his view on spirituality is very, I don't know about grounded, but it's without fluff in a way.
Oh, thanks, bro.
And I really respect that. And a lot of the time when I've been caught up too much in the mechanics and the beliefs of spirituality, I think sometimes it's easy to lose like the core of it, like the heart of it. And it's always been very funny. Harry's always had this very sort of like comedic, simplified sort of personal view of it, which I've always found it really interesting.
Thanks, man.
I wanted to start off by asking you, Harry, about what your most spiritual experience has
Going
been.
right in the deep end, then.
Yeah. Starting off with a bang.
One thing I find a lot of meaning in, which I think Harry can also relate to in a way, is dreams. I think dreams are incredibly important to anybody because they're the most honest thing about you. It's you entering your own internal world. Everything around you is a reflection of how you interpret the world to be. And I had this one dream where everything felt so real that it kind of changed my view on death. So, kind of really going into the deep end here. Am I allowed to mention?
I don't mention the people's house that it was at, but just you can mention the story.
So the.
Oh, and you can mention the taking the mushrooms.
Yeah, that's
as well.
what I was asking about. Yeah,
yeah, that's fine.
So we're at Blank and Blank's house, and this is in the dream, by the way. And we had just taken magic mushrooms within the dream, and
which has never obviously happened in real life. We would never do anything
not.
illegal.
No, 100%. Like, don't do drugs, kids.
But in the dream, obviously, which is it's legal to take mushrooms whilst dreaming.
But I'd taken a bunch of mushrooms, and I decided it was a good idea just to kind of like lay on the floor and look up at the sky. Now, the people's house that we're at have this kind of like wonderful kind of coloured ceiling, so I think I was like transfixed in the colours. And I decided to close my eyes, and for some reason I felt called to hum. And so I started humming. I went, and when I was doing that, a white light started just appearing in front of me. And when I stopped humming, it disappeared. And so I thought, this is interesting. So I decided to go one step further and like see how far I could take it. So, again, I went, and when I did this white light engulfed my vision, and it was just completely white. And then I opened my eyes, and I was in my bed. And it's the only time that I can recall that I've actually experienced the process of waking up. Because I'm sure you can attest to this, Harry, like, you have a dream, and then you end up waking up from that dream, but you can rarely remember the actual process of kind of like going from one stage to the other and being present for all of that, right? But with this one, I was present for every stage of the way, and I remembered it. And because the world that I left behind felt so real, it felt like I died. And so it reminded me of this intuition I got a few years back of the fact that we all live within a dream. And I think the world that we're living in now is one big shared dream shared by every single member of mankind. And when we die, when we go through the process of actually dying, that story of the white light that so many people see kind of like just reminded me of that white light that engulfed my vision when I was waking up, and it made me think maybe that's what death's like. We end up becoming the dreamer of whatever life that we're living, and whether that be some kind of disincorporated soul or something else or God.
It's interesting to me that
we wake up.
Your spirituality is always very personal. It's always based on your own intuition.
Yeah.
Which I think I've got a lot of respect for that, because a lot of people...
Thanks, man.
They try to analyse it through what other people have said. One of the things that really pains me is when I hear people, and I can feel their truth, but then they say, well, this is how this works, and this is how this works. And I can feel like a level of like dishonesty in that, where it's not really them coming through.
Yeah.
There's a layer of they heard it and it just kind of sounds right to them, and they just kind of parrot it forwards. And I think you're pretty good at just anchoring in you what intuitively feels right to you, and then just kind of following that through.
Yeah, well, I think we all have teachers. I think it's important to kind of like learn from the people around us. Don't get me wrong. I think there's some people who are more proficient in something. I believe in proficiency. However, I also believe in the fact that sticking to one spiritual teacher isn't necessarily the way to go forward, because I've never been able to see the difference between what people count as, spirituality and just ordinary life, because I think they're both indistinguishable from each other. I think that you can learn as much from, Cliff the Builder as you can from, someone like Teal Swan. Like, it just depends on your personal philosophy, what you value in terms of your own
about
life.
Values, I think.
What you want to take forward with you.
Yeah, and I think what gets me is when other people start. They don't have a strong grip on their own values, and then so they use the values of other people as a way to kind of orient their own values, if that makes sense. And so they kind of replace other people's values with their own values, because they don't have enough sense of what their own values actually are.
Yeah, it needs to feel true to you. Like, there's so many people that I know of that, I think are wise beyond their years, but, you get them talking about something, and then you personally realise they're talking complete shit.
Yeah.
It just depends on what that person is proficient in. And I think everybody has their own levels of proficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a thing about, there is general maturity, because I think there is a path to your own proficiency. People have a natural, strength. People have a natural area which they have their proficiency in. And I think some people are very far down that journey of mastering that skill that is innate to them, and some people are earlier on the journey. So I do think it's not just like everyone's the same. Not everyone is at the same level. I don't think that everyone is.
What do you mean by that?
Because I think people have an innate drive. They have like an innate thing that they have come to express. And I think some people are further down their path of mastering that particular unique expression, and some people are earlier on and they're still fumbling around, but they haven't quite refined it.
But that's the key word there, like unique. Their unique expression.
Yes.
Just because one thing works for somebody doesn't mean that it's the path that somebody else needs to take.
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest sort of thoughts about spirituality, is not what is right, but what is going to work for the individual person.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's so many contradicting spiritual teachings which seem to point you in different directions, and I think the only way that you can kind of process that, you know, if you care about that, is to really ask yourself and tune into yourself and feel which way your compass is heading, and utilize the teachings that bolster that, rather than, you know, like it's a classic thing of a lot of the time when people get into spirituality, they say, oh, I'm not doing good enough because I haven't tuned into the present moment enough, or I'm not enlightened enough, or I'm not this, and whatever path it is.
But ironically, by doing that, they're tuning themselves away from the present moment, because they're expecting themselves to be some ideal that they've ascribed to spirituality. Where in truth, as I was saying earlier, I don't believe there's a gap between life and spirituality. I kind of think it's all part of it.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, like the process of, you know, of meditation can be just as calming as taking a shit, depending on like what exactly your mood is in. You know, like, because it's the same process at the end of the day. If you're...
This is why I called it Talking with the Villagers.
Because if you're meditating and stuff, you know, you're taking a minute to kind of like calm the fact that your mind's, you know, you become clogged up with stuff. Same thing about like when you've kind of like, you know, you've had quite a rough day, you've eaten way too much, and you just need to let it go. You know, that's kind of...
Your soul's purpose is really being the clown.
Yeah,
you really are the jester. Yeah. You really are it's about the performance for you.
Yeah, or if you get a laugh out of someone, you know, you've got an emotional reaction out of them, and you can tell a lot from that.
You're great at that.
Thanks, brother.
It's like your life. You like exude that. It's been very humbling as well, because I have this mindset of, I am very.
You're analytical.
I'm analytical. Though I can be floaty in my thinking, it's always I'm always trying to, like, connect the dots.
Yeah.
I'm like I've got this engineer type mindset.
You're about the process of it.
Yeah, like a spiritual engineer. It's like though people can say, oh, well, your thought is very abstract and floaty and ungrounded, I'm always trying to refine it, and I'm always trying to build something in my mind.
Yeah, and I think there's a strength to that as well. Like, you know, sometimes I get a bit jealous of the fact that, like, you have this ability to just kind of, you know, concentrate for more than a minute on something that's going through you.
Yeah.
Whereas my intuition is less kind of like, let's sink into this, which is more like yours, and more kind of like electrical wires. I think we were having a conversation last night about this, and like, so for an example, for those who don't know me, which like is probably most of you listening, imagine like a bit of electricity going down an electrical wire, and then you end up introducing another kind of like electrical source to something. When I see something, especially when it's beautiful, when it's artistic, you know, something that I want to take a photo of, for instance, all of my attention is immediately drawn towards that one thing, and like it's no longer, it's not based upon the fact that like, oh, I think that would be nice. It's just like, I have to do this. I don't know why, but I have to do this.
But it's interesting, we both relate in that way where we both get incredibly strong intuitions through, and then we're just trying to verbalize it all the time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they think in a very like real world kind of way. Their mind is focused on the real world, temporal kind of world of things and stuff and relationships in this very sort of material way. And then to kind of get into that intuitive mindset, it's like a reach. Whereas we both have this thing where it's the opposite way round for us. We're always trying to get like down. We're trying to ground ourselves because we can become sort of ungrounded, and we become more embedded in our sort of intuitive thoughts. And
we're both very floaty people naturally.
Yeah, definitely. And that's actually what I'm trying to go through right now, is to ground myself a lot more.
But I think both of us have that thing in common where, like, I think you can agree, intuition's a non-verbal process. The more you try to think about it, the more you lose it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think thinking is important, you know, like, because if you go into the world without thinking about it, you know, you end up making a bunch of stupid decisions. But, like, intuition is something that is a skill to harness alongside it. So, like, when something, you know, is clogging up your mind, say, like, if you've got too much stuff going on, you just need, like, the answer, just kind of, like, sinking down into yourself, or just kind of, like, following kind of, like, your gut instinct on something can help you reach that.
You can translate it, though, but it's not a verbal process. I think it requires more intuition. I always think that asking yourself intelligent questions is the best way to do it. So if you stop and you go, you get an intuition and you're like, okay, I feel you're kind of trying to say something, but I want more clarity. And then you ask yourself, what are you trying to show me? And then you stop and then you listen. Then your mind will start to give you more bits of clarity, and it will start to specify and stuff. And it does start to build that gap. And it's I don't know, it's quite an interesting process.
Yeah. Anything else you want to ask? That was a good conversation chain, but I think we've reached the end of it.
I wonder if we can speak about something more grounded now, because people have probably got a sense of the weird worlds of the two Harrys.
Well, I guess you know, what do you mean by grounded? You know, because this is a podcast as well.
Okay.
If we're gonna like spend the majority of the time just kind of like going, then like that'll be it.
Okay.
Really.
Okay. So I'll start off.
It's meditative and it helps, but like, you know, doesn't make for good listening.
I'll start off. Right, stop interrupting me, mate.
Sorry. Sorry, go on.
I think that's one of the things that's fun about us, is we've got a very good comedy dynamic. I think that's one of the pillars of our friendship. Is we've got weirdly in sync comedy dynamic,
especially when there's people out of a loop who are just kind of like looking in, just being like, what the fuck are these two doing?
Yeah. No, it's fun. It's funny. We make a really good double act.
Well, you know, there's that time we were at George's New Year's party, and we spent the time just doing whippets and riding each other down the stairs. You know, like...
Yeah, that was good.
That was a great night.
I don't remember the whippets.
You don't remember the whippets?
No, I remember riding you down the stairs.
We were also very drunk, I think, at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you were saying.
I love it. Like our little comedy duo. I think it's interesting. There's like a combative nature to our comedy, which kind of. It's like there's a competition to it, but it kind of makes it kind of entertaining. There's like a back and forth,
kind of verbally sparring a little bit.
Yeah,
sometimes.
it's like it's you're just trying to mess with me and trying to like deconstruct the structure that I've made, and I'm just trying to like put it all back in boxes, and it's just this process of you unpacking the boxes and then me putting them back in.
It's just so fun for some reason. I don't know why. Like, I have mastered the art of winding people up.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But the thing I need to learn is like when to actually use it, because like sometimes, like, say if we're trying to like actually build a situation up, it can be like, Harry, this isn't helping. This is just.
I remember when we were editing Do you remember the music video?
Yeah.
I remember when we were editing the music video, and then I would be focusing on it, and I'd be trying to fix something in the editing software, and every 30 seconds you'd come up with some stupid little joke thing, and I would like turn around after like 10 minutes, and I'm like, do you want to get this done, or do you just want to mess with my head?
Yeah. Well, there is cases where when it's not paired with something constructive, I think like the art of destruction works in situations that call for it. So there was this git in university once. I've told you this story before, but just for the sake of the audience, where there was this guy from a neighbouring university that's also in York. That narrows it down a little bit. Who was just, you know, those types of people who...
You chip on his shoulder.
He's got a chip on his shoulder to the point where, like, he's trying to make everybody else feel like shit to prop himself up.
Yeah.
You know, like constantly bigging himself up and kind of putting down my university, which I'm not going to tell which one it is because I don't want to, like, spoil this guy's identity.
All right.
But his name, I'm not going to give away his surname, but his first name was Carl. And I decided...
You can remember it now.
I decided because he was very obviously a bit of a narcissist. Like, he was a bit of a dick to the guy he was dating. And he was just kind of, like, putting him down. He was also, like, his boss. There was, like that
That's
weird...
That's a weird power dynamic.
Very weird. But, like, he kept on kind of, like, putting him down and, like, you know, taking the mick out of him to his face. So, evidently a bit of a narcissist. So I thought the best way to deal with a narcissist is constantly get his name wrong over the course of the night. So, like, I did it innocently at first by kind of, like, you know, going, you know, slightly away from Carl, but, like, something that could easily be...
Craig.
Like, Craig, yeah. It'd be like, it's Carl. And I'm like, oh, sorry, Carl, yeah. And I get his name right kind of, like, a few more times. And I call him, like... you know, Chris. Like, it's Carl. I'm like, all right, yeah, sorry, Carl. I keep on forgetting your name. And then, like, you know, by the end of the night, I was calling him Carrot. It was very clear that I was just fucking with him. And, like, it was just so fun.
Yeah, you're very good at equalising power.
Yeah. And I think, like, you know, power is an important thing, you know, like, I think leaders, you know, are important. I don't want to, like, you know, like, bash the fact that, you know, certain situations, you need someone kind of, like, leading the way who's more proficient in something, just to be like, yeah, okay, like, this way is what we should go. I've got no problems with leaders. What I have got a problem with is bosses. I've got a problem with people who try and kind of, like, you know, they try and put everyone down to kind of, like lift themselves up. You know?
You don't mean just a literal boss.
No, I don't mean like just a...
You mean somebody who...
Someone who leads from the back, you know, as opposed to leading from the front. I think true leaders lead from the front. True leaders kind of, like, lead by example, and they're like, you know, this is what we're going to do, you know? Like, and they care about the people that they're leading.
Yeah, I think that's important, caring about the people that they're leading.
The people who don't care about the people that they're leading, I think those people are the people who need to kind of, like, be taken down a peg. Because, you know, they evidently don't deserve the position of power that they've been given. Because, like, you know, they're just plopping other people down.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have respect for people like that.
Yeah, and it's good because you're able to sort of, like, you've refined this art of messing with people. It's good that you can be trusted to, if there is one of those situations where somebody's... Because I think what's interesting is you use yourself as, like, a pawn in messing with people. You don't care about getting a bit of dirt on yourself.
No, I don't mind, like, people kind of, like, thinking I'm an idiot just to kind of, like have someone underestimate me and then, like, come up with, like, a witty one-liner after that. Like, that actually makes it more fun for me.
I think that's what's interesting is you can be often quite ungrounded. People sometimes make the mistake of thinking that you're unintelligent. And that's when it's like, it's great because you take people off guard because you're actually incredibly intelligent.
Thanks, bro.
But Jesus, man, so ungrounded. like with this morning with the conversation about the bread.
You put it in the freezer.
Okay.
Who puts bread in the freezer?
So this morning,
Post in the comments.
I posted in the comments. So this morning, we were talking about my grandma makes her own bread.
Yeah, sometimes I genuinely can be thick. That's
But I think it's ungrounded. It's like you're because you're so in that, like, you're connected to your own intuition. You're ungrounded from the reality of maybe how you appear or what the world, how the world kind of functions.
Yeah, but anyway, tell the story.
So my grandma makes her own bread, and Harry's like, oh, that's cool. Does she have a windmill? And I was like, what do you mean? And you're like, well, bread needs a windmill. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, maybe if we're in the 1500s. But also not bread, it's the flour is made with the windmill and it's used to grind down the grains into flour. And you're like, oh, I just thought bread needed a windmill.
I thought it did. You know, like I thought that was the way that bread was made. I'm a townie, right? I'm not a bread making guy. You know, I don't come from a bread making family.
You're not the village idiot, you're the town idiot.
I'm a town idiot, but keep the village idiot title because it works better. But like, you know, like I don't come from a bread making family like Harry. Like
a bread making family. I love the way you word things sometimes. I love that whole thing where you make something a thing, but it's not like a thing. A bread making family.
Make it sound
like we're a long lineage of bread making.
Make it sound like a social class.
Yeah.
But
hello, Mr. and Mrs. Baker.
I just didn't know that's how bread was. I thought you needed a windmill. I thought you needed wind power to kind of like churn things along. Evidently, that's not how it's made. You can actually put it in the oven, but.
Oh man, you are an enigma, and I bloody love you.
Oh, I love you too, buddy. Anyway, groundedness. We're on the subject of groundedness.
It's hopeless, isn't it? But I think in a way you help me to ground in the sense of if my ego becomes overinflated, you're very good at like discharging that. There's like a childlike simplicity to the way that you express yourself and appreciate the world, which sometimes takes some time. I guess I can become overly grandiose, and I can kind of or be overly serious and analytical, and to the point where it starts to feel stale and dead. And I think you always inject a certain amount of chaos and life into me, so that it kind of helps me to reanalyze, to take stock and to kind of rebuild my foundation and build it stronger.
Yeah.
And in not such like a rigid and sort of dysfunctional way, if that makes sense.
Because I think like the most powerful part of any person's arsenal, I think, is like whenever you connect to the inner child within you. Now I think I am, and I'm sure you'd agree, like I have a childlike side to me where like if there's an opportunity for me to make a pun or a dirty joke, I'm gonna take it. You know, like, but I think like for someone whose childlike side, you know, is a lot more out of balance, like you can end up like, when I say you, I mean the general you, not like one. I mean, like I think you can end up taking life a little bit too seriously sometimes. Like again, like the general you, and I think like And I think there is situations which call for like say if you're dealing with someone's trauma, or if you're dealing with, you know, a lot of the things that like really set someone off, you know, a delicate hand is needed, you know. But even then, like, connecting to being a child isn't always just kind of like acting like a prat, you know. Sometimes it's like the process of just being like, this child that was once me once went through this thing, and it kind of like changed my view of the world a little bit, you know, and it's kind of like been taken with me to adulthood. It's like kind of like going to the root source of something and being like, okay, this is where this kind of like this trauma, if you like, was born. You know, like, so I think the most powerful thing in any person's spiritual vocabulary is to kind of like connect with the inner child, because it's got a lot to say.
I think it brings life, and it brings freshness, and it doesn't put up with like stale, stagnant energy. It doesn't put up with these sorts of life-robbing it doesn't put up with any sort of life-robbing structures that have been put in place with your life, whether it's in your own self, in the way you act, or whether it's in your life and the work that you do and the relationships you have with people. That child within you is and I would call it more innocence, because I don't want to, you know, like, I don't like to personalize parts of ourselves and to make us feel fragmented. That's a whole other topic, but anyway. But I would say that innocence inside of us, it wants to live a life that is filled with that magic, is filled with the honest expression of ourselves, and it doesn't just become routine and dead. So I think it's very important to freshen things up, and I definitely can sometimes enter that mode where that gets put to the side, and I'm more just focused on the structure that I'm trying to build or the work I'm trying to do.
Well, I think a lot of us have been forced to grow up too quickly in this day and age, you know, like, especially like being a teenager is fucking traumatic. Right? You go through the process of kind of like everybody treating you like a kid, but expecting you to act and behave grown up. What is that?
It's awful. It's awful. You know, you're as trapped as a kid. You've got more responsibilities than a kid. Everyone treats you like a kid. Nobody respects you or gives you any freedom. You're starting to grow up. Your mind's starting to develop, and you're starting to develop your own ideas and identity. And it's just the worst of all worlds.
Yeah,
really.
And then like when you get to the end of it, when you're 18, all of a sudden people are just being like, okay, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't fucking know.
You know, I was trapped like a kid for the past 18 years.
Yeah, I was trapped in this kind of like system of, you know, oh, okay, so do that. And whenever you've, you know, tried to kind of like bring up any hobbies that you want to kind of like pursue and stuff, it takes second place to your schoolwork.
And I think that should be the focus. Is I think people's individual excellence and passion should be the focus of our lives and our early lives as well. And I think that the other schooling, the normal stuff, the maths and the English, should definitely be a part of it. But I think it should be in aid of what a person's natural talents are towards. If we just let everyone's natural talents flourish, the world would be so much greater.
Yeah.
And it's taken me so long since leaving college to actually rewire myself so that I can actually create something that I'm proud of and is actually me, and to unwire the years of just, you know, I'm like so much of that time was spent, I'm sort of waiting for somebody else to say, here's your homework, here's what to do, in a way, and it was really hard to self-motivate, and I've only just kind of got to this place where I'm becoming pretty good at self-motivating.
You have become good at self-motivating. Like every time we meet up, like, you know, you've been like, okay, like, what's the project that we're going to do today?
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm proud of you, man.
And I love it as well. And that's the thing, is working and doing this stuff should be something you love, you know?
I actually think, I've got like a thing that I've been thinking about, like for ages, which is like, I actually think that someone's 20s, in the civilization that we live in at the moment, should act like your second childhood. It's the part of your life, like when you're in your 30s, you know, you've settled in a little bit. You know, we know people in their 30s, kind of like, you know, they've gone from being in their 20s when we first met them, who were just kind of like trying a bunch of things out, making mistakes as all people should, but like, you know, feeling a bit ungrounded, to being in their 30s and suddenly just having this need to kind of like be like, okay, like, how am I going to settle with this? I think you and I are effectively in our second childhood now. We're playing about with different things and seeing what sticks. You know, we're in that phase of our life where it's like,
it's like letting your authenticity kind of come through.
It's the first time.
It's like the first part of your childhood. It's hopefully you just get to muck around and do what you want to do, and then you get this like decade and a half or however long where they say, now you've got to do what we tell you to do. And then you repress that and you lose that. And I think, and I'm trying to integrate like that adult side of myself, but also that like innocence of myself, where I'm trying to do something that has my heart behind it.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the people who get like midlife crises, you know, I think that's maybe like a delayed version of what we're having now. Because I think we got out of college and then we realised, we looked at the world and we went, this isn't going to cut it. What do I need? And so we kind of we're kind of going through these crises right now. But I think a lot of people, they listen to what other people say and they say, okay, I'll take the path that you're suggesting I take. And then they get to 40 and they realise, wait a second, this isn't fulfilling me. And then they have this crisis. So I think it's good that we're having this crisis now, if that makes sense. And we're trying to connect to ourselves and to try and make it work in the world as well.
Exactly. Hey, 40-year-old us, like, if this is still on YouTube or wherever it is... Oh, we're putting it on Odysee,
Odysee, this is going on Odysee.
Yeah. If this is still on Odysee at that point in time, just comment below, like, let us know how your life's going.
It's going to be, 15 years? Oh my god, it's only 15 years till I'm 40.
It's insane.
Weird. That's weird.
It's 16 years until I'm 40.
16. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
The future is ours, old man.
Oh, 40 isn't old.
But yeah. Where were we?
Don't know.
Yeah. To summarise anyway what I was talking about, like, I think it's vital for every person living today to kind of like have that period in their 20s where they're just kind of like experiencing life consciously through new eyes, you know, dealing with the shit of the past that they've had to deal with, and then like wiping the slate clean as much as they possibly can for their 20s, because their 20s is where they should start to kind of like fully... I don't think you can do it later in life as well. I don't think, like, you know, it's exclusively that. No. But I think, you know, it's a time, if you're in your 20s listening, like, give it a go. But you could equally, like, you know, if you're in your 40s and you want to kind of, like, do an Alan Moore and decide to become a wizard, you know, like, absolutely do that. But, like, I think you should have that time, at least in your life, where you just kind of embody second childhood. And the reason why I say do it in your 20s if you can is because you've got, like, 80 plus years as a result? To just play.
And I think as well, it's probably like a delayed response. I think ideally that should just be the whole beginning part of your life. But I think doing it in your 20s is kind of the next best thing when we're put through the schooling system and stuff in a way that basically just wants to crush all of that out of us. So ideally, it should never stop, and that you should just learn to integrate that with your adult self. And to make the two things whole. But I think, like, from a lot of us, we get out of that environment, and then we kind of take up the
Yeah.
take up the mantle.
Learning to embrace the adult within us is also important as well. Like, as you were saying, like, when I say connect to the child, like, know that that part of you exists and will always exist, and like is as vital a part of you as the adult, which I've always kind of viewed the adult as like the shield. The adult is the one who kind of like guards you and takes you forward and kind of like places you where you need to go in terms of your life. You know, like the adult is the one who's saying like to the inner child, don't shit your pants. You know, you're not wearing a nappy anymore. You know, or like pay your taxes, otherwise, you know, you're gonna be out on the fucking street.
It's not just the boring stuff. It's like the adult, I think, is kind of a guide to life.
Shitting your pants is boring.
Well,
Sorry, yeah,
no,
go on.
Not, man. You've just totally you just ruined my flow there, man.
Sorry. It's not just the boring stuff.
It's not just the boring stuff. I think the adult is a guide, and the adult enjoys learning the world and helping you adapt to the world and helping you move through the world. I think sometimes because the world that people have been in for so long is a very dry and boring world, we kind of look at the adult with this sort of sense of it's like it's not quite as good as the child aspect, because the child aspect is fun and it's carefree, and then the adult is kind of seems stale. But I don't think the adult is necessarily stale. I think it's just we've got a stale society.
Yeah, you're right.
And because I love that, like I love working and I love planning things out, and I love all of those sides, and it is nice when you can also open up and be carefree and be silly and have a laugh, but
the adult is the one who looks at the kind of like looks at all the fun you're having and kind of like has a smile like at the side of his face, like a calm like
yeah
like the kid's the part that's like let's do this, and the adult's like,
and they're both necessary for each other. They're both absolutely necessary.
Hell yeah.
Okay, so I guess I want to ask, what do you want to leave the world?
What do I want to leave the world?
Like, what of yourself do you feel that you are skillful at? You know, you that what's part of your like your soul, your essence? What do you want to like imprint the world and give people as like a wow? You know, I'm so glad for Harry Gibson and he taught me this about life or whatever.
I think anything that like fills someone up with like a brief bit of inspiration of like, oh wow, that's so cool. Like I feel so inspired by that. Anything that inspires somebody, like, or just something that gets a positive reaction in general. I love the idea of just kind of like leaving behind things that just kind of like make people laugh. Or I've got a good friend of mine called Sally, who, if you're listening, hey Sal, who kind of like opened my mind up to this idea that I've contemplated for a while now, and I think there's a truth to it, which is I don't necessarily care if I make something grandiose or not. The thing that I care about is the fact that somebody enjoyed it. I don't care about like, it'd be cool to kind of like, you know, make something kind of like massive and have people kind of like following it and being like, oh, this project's so good, I want to like support it. But like the main focus is just kind of like on the individual basis, you know. And that doesn't just go for the things that I make in the world. Like I want to know that somebody is better off for having known me. You know, and I think a lot of us want that.
I think you value bringing people, in a sense, into the present moment. Not in that sort of like being very in touch with the world in that sort of ambient sort of presence, but more just like the present experience, like that childlike nature again of like the way that child's excited by something and enjoys something, and I think you value that like moment by moment experience more than you know.
Because the thing is, I have helped people. Like, there's been people in my life, like that by having known them, you know, they felt kind of like listened to or heard or something, and that's all I really want. I want the people around me to feel like it by being with me, because I'm a bit of a like crazy numpty, you know, that they feel comfortable in being a bit of a crazy numpty. You know, if they need to be sad with me, they can be sad with me and it's fine. If they need to be happy with me, because I think happiness is also kind of like pushed down as much as sadness sometimes.
Yes, I agree. I really, really agree.
You know, like, I just want someone to be who they are in that moment. You know, and that's it.
I think I can trust you most of the time, more than I can with other people, to just be myself. Unfiltered, unrefined, and that you're happy with that.
Who you are is cool,
and I appreciate that, and I think that's something, because I got this drive to refine and to improve, that often ends up in a lot of like self-judgment, and it's genuinely, I love that whole feeling of refining and improving and stuff, but the fact that you're just so like there's so much acceptance on your behalf, it's been very healthy for me through the years to counterbalance my own self-judgment and stuff, and it's never taken away that drive, because I love that drive, but it's made that drive softer on myself, whereas I analyse myself and I judge myself in terms of evaluating myself, but I'm not so much critical of myself in the way that I used to be, and it's something I've genuinely benefited from. And I think in spirituality, a lot of the time, the multiplicity of people's different positive qualities gets ignored, and it all becomes like homogenized, and people say, oh, these are your chakras and this is meditation, and we've all got to try and be the best meditator.
That's the line of thinking that kind of pisses me off about not just New Age spirituality, because like I think there is a lot of stuff about New Age spirituality that's really cool, but just kind of any kind of like, you know, self-identified way of life.
Yes.
You know, what people don't take into account is that not everyone has those exact needs.
Yes.
You know, not everyone kind of like finds meaning from that. There's spiritual teachers who I won't get into here, you know, who, you know, I know you find great meaning from, but I think they're talking shit.
Yeah.
You know? It all just kind of like depends upon what you need to hear as a person. And that's what I want, like, everybody kind of like, you know, who's listening, but everybody also who I interact with to kind of like know, is that it's all right to be where you're at. It's 150% all right to be at where you're at, you know? You don't need to be anything other than who you are.
And also,
and that's not to say, that's not to say don't improve, but improve because you want to kind of like succeed, not because somebody else says that you're not good enough to be this thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah.
Improvement should come out of self-worth rather than lack of self-worth, if that makes sense. It
should come at a point, it should come from a point where you're like, I personally feel that I could do better in this thing. Not that I'm bad at this, but I could do better. You know, and kind of honing that skill and becoming more proficient in it. You know, that's where true kind of self-improvement comes from. When it comes from the point of, you're doing this wrong, your way of going about this is wrong, you know.
Yeah, wrong,
I hate that.
Wrong by whose standards?
Yeah, exactly. Wrong by whose standards. This thing that I'm doing personally, it may be kind of like, you know, bad from your eyes, but it gives my life great meaning.
And I think that's the thing, is I think for people who are proficient in something, a lot of the time they say, well, I'm proficient in this thing, so I know about this thing, so I'm right in my assessment. But I think what needs to be taken into account is writing your assessment for what, though? Like, because you're writing your assessment maybe for a person who has the same values as you. You've become very proficient in that,
and you can help those people with great efficiency.
But people have different values, and that doesn't, just because you're good at what you do doesn't mean that people have to value what you do.
Exactly. You know, like, at the end of the day, the one thing we all have in common is the fact that we were all born screaming and crying out into the world, not knowing which path it is for us to take. And at some point in our life, be it earlier or later, we found something that gives us a sense of great meaning. Some people choose to ignore it, some people choose to follow it. But the thing is, that thing that gives your life meaning, you have every right to be like, I am going to chase that.
Yeah, and it's, yeah, and I think I value that whole thing of refining what is true to you rather than changing what you are. Refining what you are, I think, is amazing. I think people should refine what they are. I think caring about refining what you are, I think, is an awesome thing. But changing what you are and altering what you are is actually interesting. In the early years when I knew you, I think that was one of the conversations I would have with you. I used to get quite frustrated because I would see you imitating other people, and I'd be like, "Man, just be you." Like you're trying to put on somebody else's personality on yourself, but your personality is good enough as you are.
Yeah, I think that was a phase I needed to go through, though, to kind of like come to the conclusion of that, because, you know, like, I may have like dressed like Doctor Who and like tried to act like, you know, like the Eighth Doctor and shit like that sometimes, but it was always from the lens of the fact that I really enjoy this thing and I just want to like do it.
Yeah, yeah,
like,
for sure.
And I think, you know, whichever stage you're at in your life, just be that thing. Like consult with other people. Like, you know, like someone might have something that you need to hear that you don't necessarily want to hear at that point in time, but ultimately you call the shots as to whether or not you actually kind of follow yourself into that path that you need to go.
And I think when you kind of respect people's unique paths, it's like they all get to support each other. And there's such nuance, and, you know, the uniqueness of human beings is incredible. Like, you even look at just one family, and, you know, in one family, you know, for the most part, you've got a similar kind of genetic set of material, but there's so much variation in characters and people, and, you know, like siblings who should have kind of similar DNA, and yet they're so different, and there's so much to be gained in such a unique way. And I think it's such a tragedy when you see people try to say, oh no, we should be this. Oh, it's the worst thing when I hear somebody's in spirituality and they judge themselves like, oh, well, I know I should be more this. I know I should be more present. I know I should be more enlightened. I know it's not right. I know it's shadowy for me to judge. But I'm just like, oh, no. Don't hold that over yourself. Don't point that gun towards yourself.
Because,
you know?
the thing is, like, if you kind of like naturally let yourself be those things, you know, you will work out yourself what feels toxic. Like, not like from labeling that behavior, kind of like from instantly kind of like going into kind of like, this is wrong, I shouldn't do this, you know, like, it kind of like, it teases the inner child in you to just be like, well, what if I want to do this? You know, and so you end up like doing it unconsciously, and then like, it ends up being shit. Inevitably, you end up coming to this stage where you're like, actually, this isn't what I want for myself.
I agree so much. I agree, and when you judge yourself so much, it's like you stop that natural growth. You don't allow for that process of you confronting the realities of the way you act. Because it's like you're at war with that side. And if you're at war with a part of yourself, that part of it yourself is going to fight for its right to be the way it is.
That being said, I think one thing I am adamant about is that if you choose to be something, you should be responsible for your actions. Like, you should kind of, like, hold yourself accountable to kind of, like, okay, I've done this thing. Like, how exactly kind of, like, can I get the most good out of this situation? So say if you've hurt somebody, maybe kind of like, obviously, you know, the best course of action, if you can resolve it, is resolve it. But if, like, it's hurt beyond repair, leave that person alone and kind of, like, aim from your own standards, but, like, aim to kind of, like, go on and continue on your journey and learn from what you've done. You know, don't try and monitor yourself in terms of, like, you know, oh, I shouldn't have done this or I shouldn't have done that, but, like, kind of learn from your experience and be like, okay, I get that.
And when you open yourself up to the reality and you open yourself up to the consequences, that change is deep and it's internal and it's natural. You don't have to force it. You don't have to monitor yourself. A lot of the times I've known that I've been in a place where I knew where I was at wasn't particularly healthy, but I had this, like, realization, this inner knowing of, like, unless I just let this out and get ready to experience the consequences of letting this out, I'm not going to grow past this.
Yeah.
So I've just let myself be that, and then the consequences would inevitably come. And then it hurt, but I let it hurt. And when you let it hurt, it realigns you in a way where it's complete. It's not like two sides of yourself, like Jekyll and Hyde, wrestling with yourself for control. One side, oh, be good and be pure, and the other side, nah, just be awful and be mean. And then you just kind of keep, like, bipolar, like, flipping backwards and forwards.
It's one person going on the journey of their life, which is kind of like, you know, making mistakes, as every single person does. And I think nobody should be afraid of making mistakes, because, like,
or nobody should expect themselves not to make mistakes.
Well, that's the thing. Because there's a quote I love from Star Wars, which, you know, like, The Last Jedi was a trashy movie, but it had this one quote which I really resonate with, which is, like, the greatest teacher failure is. You know, like, it's such a great teacher. You learn more from failing than you do from succeeding.
Yeah.
Because, like, when you fail, you see kind of, like, oh, okay, I'm human. I'm mutable. Like, I'm a person who has tried something and it's not worked out. How can I move forward? Do I want to continue trying this thing and, like, refine what I'm doing, or is this thing not for me? You know, like, and shall I move a different direction?
And the ego of a person who doesn't embrace failure, I think if you try and think of a symbol of what does a person look like who totally is trying to avoid failure, is the habitual cocaine user. The ego of a person who takes cocaine all the time, it's like this sense of, like, cocaine makes you feel like a winner. It's that serotonin, it pushes you forward.
You're alert.
You feel alert, and you don't have a problem with yourself, and you don't feel necessarily the consequences of your action. And if you meet somebody who's a habitual cocaine user and you just take an examination of their ego, you're like, wow, you're really, really confident about something that I really, really would not be confident if that was me, you know? And I think it's not to bash confidence. I think I think it's that mixture of that humble confidence where you can have the confidence to make mistakes, but you're open to experiencing the consequences and the pain.
The thing is, with the habitual cocaine user, is like more often than not, it's not confidence, it's arrogance, which is the shadow of confidence.
Yes.
You know, like arrogance is unfounded confidence. It's kind of like going forward with something, kind of naively thinking that you are proficient in something that you're just not yet.
Yeah.
You know, whereas confidence is founded, you know wholeheartly, you know, you're not trying to fool yourself into thinking this is going to work out. Like, you know wholeheartedly, I'm capable of this. I could fail, but I'm capable of doing this.
But even if you're not capable, confidence can be just confidence in where you are. You're confident enough to say, I may not be very proficient, I may not have developed the skills, I may be a mess right now, but I'm confident in the fact that I'm standing by myself, and I'm confident in taking the challenges that come my way and stepping forward in life.
Exactly.
It's that willingness to face life, but you know, without the shadow of arrogance where you're ignoring any potential downsides that come from your actions.
And every single person who's alive will experience failure, you know, like, and if it hasn't come yet, at some point it will, but you'll learn so much from it, and your successes, if you embrace the actual concept of failure, will be so much more rewarding because you will have worked for it and you'll have refined those aspects of yourself that needed improving, and you'll be just this shining golden just beacon of success. It's
when somebody's captured the ability to be really confident in themselves, but they've let those consequences carve them. There's there's such a grace to that sort of person.
You know, and like, you'll encourage other people who might feel unconfident in where they're going to be like, hey, just try, just try, honestly. Like, you might fail, but trust me, if you embrace the energy of that failure, it's on the way to success. You will find success if you just keep on going down this path that you need to go down.
Yeah. Man, I think that's a good conclusion.
Hell yeah, I think that's a good conclusion too.
Alright, this has been episode 1 of the Woodoo Podcast.
I helped come up with the name, by the way, just putting that out there.
It's a great name. And Harry Gibson here, and I'm Harry Helsing.
It's been a pleasure, buddy.
Yeah, talking to the village idiot. Alright,
see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.